Washington's in the national championship? Just how sustainable is this level of success for the Huskies?
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation and Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. All right, Lars. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about was the sustainable level of success for Washington, because through 2 years with this roster, we've seen Kalen DeBoer and his coaching staff go so far 26-2 or 27-2, excuse me, win a Sugar Bowl, win the Alamo Bowl, get to the college football playoff, but we're going to see a lot of roster turnover after this season. And I don't like, because I know how some of this, like, especially in our little intro just there, how some of that might sound like this is a negative thing. That's not how this, I wanted to make sure that this was portrayed in any way, that Kalen DeBoer is going to find a lot of success while he's here at Washington. The question is, especially in a 12-team playoff with moving to the Big Ten, can this become, what's the floor really is the question. Is it 8 wins? Is it 10 wins? I feel like that's the biggest question here, because I feel that Washington is going to have a really, really high level of success as long as Kalen DeBoer is coaching the university.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that the floor is 10, and then the ceiling is whatever they get to, if it's 15 or 16. I think it's pretty clear the ceiling is the national championship and the floor is 10 wins, because I can't envision a world, and this is also why you go and get Will Rogers, even with Austin Mack and Will Haskell on the roster, because yes, ideally you would like to roll with Austin Mack for 3 or 4 years, like did with Jake Browning back in the day under Chris Peterson. But in this day and age of quick, look what you did with Penix, and that was not expected. So now getting Will Rogers, you need to maintain that level of success while developing the players behind him. So normally you could say, okay, well, next year when they roll out Austin Mack, they might go 7-5, 8-4, right? Because Austin Mack is good. He's got a good skill set, but he's so young, and both just as a player and as a person, it's kind of hard to expect him to replicate what Michael Penix has done, being a 24-year-old quarterback, 22, 23, whatever he is. And so now that you're having Will Rogers come in for that stopgap year, that's why the bar is 10. Because otherwise you could say, well, let's see what year 3 does. Because in year 3, if they go 8-4, 7-5, like they're never going to go worse than 7-5. But like in the worst possible year, you could go 8-4 and say, okay, this is when we had all freshmen basically, replacing everybody on the line, everybody at receiver, all that. But that's why you're not having that's why you're not having that drop off, because you're bringing in these impact transfers and guys that are going to play, because you don't want to have that drop off, right? Like if you're Kalen, you don't want to go right to a nice 4-star freshman that you recruited because, hey, maybe we can bring him along, and we have this thing called the transfer portal now. So that's kind of why the barometer has changed a bit from what it used to be under like Chris Peterson and those coaches back in 2016 to what it, and back in that decade to what it is now, because of the evolution of the sport.
So I'm glad you brought up a couple things there. The first one being Will Rogers, because you're right. And because it goes well beyond Will Rogers in 2024. We got a lot of questions when we did our last couple of live shows about Will Rogers versus Austin Mack and what that's going to look like in 2024. And we got a lot of questions about just like, oh, what can this look like going forward? Because there seems to be a lot that this coaching staff can build on, because they do a really good job at, a sustained level of success. And I think when we look at the transfer portal, there's going to be so much there to help continue the success. So I think that's a big thing, right? You start with Will Rogers, then you go get guys like BJ Green. I know he hasn't signed yet, but he's also there. You go get a guy like Jeremiah Hunter, who you miss out on Aaron Butler. You just say, all right, we're going to get one of the best receivers in the transfer portal in Jeremiah Hunter. So you do that, and that helps sustain the success where you prove, okay, we can bring in high-level transfers like these guys to, mitigate the loss of a Rome Odunze, of a Jalen McMillan, of a Jalen Polk. So while it's not, completely replacing 3 NFL receivers, you still have talent in that room, plus some of these stopgaps where that's something this coaching staff has proven that they're really, really good at already. So I feel like that's really promising. And then on top of that, it's a conversation. I know we've had a little bit on the air, but it needs to be said just in the context of what we're talking about here. Washington is playing Michigan in technically the Big Ten championship, just for the national championship. So it's fair to say that Washington is already a top 5 program in the Big Ten. I feel like that's not, that's a very fair statement to make, because Michigan and Ohio State obviously are 1 and 2. They've been the powers there for a really long time. And then you get to that next tier. I feel like you can put them in their own tier. And then below that, you can have Penn State, Washington, Oregon, USC, because there's, Wisconsin, there's Michigan State. But after you get past Michigan and Ohio State, Washington is right there with the rest of them. You can order them however you want. You can debate and have a very legitimate argument for a lot of those programs, right? As much as, we like to run down Oregon on the show, they've made a college football playoff. They've made a national championship. Did they win? No. Was that 10 years ago? Yes. But they've still been at that level. We know what USC can be when it's really good. We know what Penn State can be when it's really good. And Washington is right there with those teams. So it feels like as long as the money is coming in and this coaching, the continuity with this coaching staff is there, which is something that Kalen DeBoer has emphasized how important that is, that this team can continue to produce at a very high level.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key is you're probably going in that second tier in the Big Ten, because I think, if this team, like, with Penix and everybody was going into the Big Ten next season, then sure, you can say you're that upper echelon. Right now, I don't know if I can say who's better, Drew Allaire at Penn State or Will Rogers at Washington. You can't make that.
I like Drew Allaire a lot. I think he's a really talented player, but there's still some work there.
So do I. But at the same point, we also don't know how Will Rogers is going to look with Ryan Grubb, right? Because we've seen it with the air raid and Mike Leach, but he also won 8-9 games max down there. Like, it wasn't like he won a national championship or even competed for a playoff with Mike Leach. So, but that's not a slight to Will Rogers, right? I mean, again, you're bringing in Penix, you're bringing in these guys with the thought of, hey, we can get more out of them than their previous school did because we have better coaches. So that's kind of what you're betting on. But I agree with your principle, but I would still say Washington's below Ohio State and Michigan.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, there's a tier there after Michigan and Ohio State.
Yeah. I think I would more or less put them in that Penn State. I would say Michigan, Ohio State, and then Penn State, Washington are basically in the same bracket, because I think and this is what's going to be interesting about the Big Ten, because there's the East Coast swing for Penn State and then Washington and the West Coast. Fair assessment that Penn State might have more brand recognition. And I know Washington fans are going to hate me saying that, but the state success over Penn State, and again, they also have the Sandusky thing and all that. So there's a lot of things that go against them, and Washington doesn't have that. But nobody really thinks about that. And now you're kind of looking at 2 programs who are in the upper tier of the Big Ten, but aren't truly at that Ohio State, Michigan level yet, but one of those 2 could be. And I think that's your point.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. That is my point. All right, Lars. So Spencer and I, we had a lot of fun yesterday talking about just kind of what Washington's biggest advantage over Michigan is, and vice versa. So we're going to talk about the Michigan advantage. We're going to talk about the run game. I know it's something you and I talked about the other day, and we're going to talk about what Washington can do to counter that Michigan run game. That'll be right after we give a message to our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets win or lose. The app is so easy to use. There's so many different ways to bet, like live same game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays. Shout out to the Parlay Hub. It got me a couple bucks when we were down in Louisiana. I appreciate that. Some anytime touchdown bets and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet a layup. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. And as we like to remind all the everydayers out there, Washington's still 4.5-point underdog on FanDuel. So, if you're in a state where you can do that, you might want to throw a couple bucks down on that. So, Lars, Michigan. Go ahead.
I was going to say, just real quick segue off of that. Does Jeremy Bernard get credit for giving Texas a touchdown on the anytime touchdown, or is that not how that works?
Unfortunately, not.
I just wanted to get that one out because I think, but I will segue this, and I kind of, how does Washington counter Michigan's running? I just want to kind of touch on this really quick. The one thing that I know I brought up to you, Kalen DeBoer has had his special teams touchdown in every single national championship that he's won. How does Jeremy Bernard make up for that? There's your win.
Well, remember, they have had a special teams touchdown this season as well. So, and that was something that I saw when we put that out after the Cal game. I know when I tweeted that, it immediately got bookmarked by a lot of people. And hey, look at where Washington is now. So just throwing that out there. But Lars, we've talked a lot about Michigan's really talented run game because Michigan is a fantastic team. They would not be at this point if they were not a very talented, fantastic team behind a really good offensive line. They've done some really good things. Blake Corum is a really talented back. Washington in the Pac-12 championship game found a way to slow down Oregon's run game. They did a really good job of that. And of course, they don't necessarily have as much time to scout. But one thing that was mentioned on the Split Zone Duo podcast is that there were some Big Ten schools that were willing to help out Washington, gave them some film on Michigan to help them out, and just said, hey, this is what we tried to do against them. So that was a really interesting nugget that I remember hearing a little bit earlier today as we record on Thursday. But I'm very curious because I know I said this the other day, but when I talked to Chuck Morrell about stopping the Texas run game versus stopping Oregon, he told me it's a little bit easier with a team like Oregon, not in terms of what they do, but in terms of we've seen them a couple times. So there's that familiarity. Washington, just like with Texas, they don't have that with Michigan, or at least not this step. So I'm really curious to see what they can do to counter this run game. And if they just want to load the box and say, we are going to make you throw the ball to beat us.
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, the thing is, because that would be my case, right? That Washington would load the box, but they didn't load the box against Texas, and Sark kind of got away from the run game probably more than he should. I honestly was surprised. I know why, right? Because you're going to say it's the time and where you are in the field. But you couldn't tell me that Texas doesn't call one draw play and gets a touchdown on that final drive in 4 plays. I think there's
a very strong possibility there.
I think they beat Washington if they run the ball. The fact that they put the ball in Quinn Ewers' hands is why they lost. So I don't know if I would be surprised, and go back and watch the Alabama game. Michigan took the ball out of J.J. McCarthy's hands. Blake Corum, 2 carry touchdown in overtime, seals your win. Right. J.J. McCarthy didn't have to do squat. So I think Washington's ability or inability to tackle in space and win at the line of scrimmage is going to be whether this is a game or if Michigan's able to rout him, because there also is a potential for Washington to get – because as scary of a matchup as Washington was for Texas, this almost is kind of as scary for Washington because one of the greatest running backs in college football, proven capable. But then you also got Donovan Edwards who can run the ball as well, and it's kind of a off spell to spell Blake Corum. And so you got 2 capable running backs, one who knows how to find the end zone, really elusive and hard to tackle. And what's Washington's struggle been throughout the season?
Tackling.
And
but that's why I bring up Oregon.
Yeah.
But that's why I bring up Oregon, because and this is something that Spencer did a really good job of yesterday, where Spencer kept saying that, because when we were talking about, Oregon versus Texas in the lead up to that game, we had a lot of Texas fans saying, well, this is so different. And like, why are you bringing everything back to Oregon? Because that's a really good team that this Husky team beat twice this season. So I think that it's very valid to make that comparison. And we can do that again here, not in terms of style, because they're very different stylistically. We had some Michigan fans saying, hey, you guys need to watch a little bit more Michigan film. So I did my best to go back and do a little bit of that this morning. So the style is very different. especially when you can't really compare Bucky Irving and Blake Corum. They're two very different players. But in terms of how Washington attacked Oregon, I think it's going to be a very similar plan against Michigan. That's just my 2 cents there. Where I'm really curious just to see, because something I said yesterday is I think that MJ Ale is going to be just one of my surprise X factors in this game, because he knows he needs to do a better job of getting to the backfield, something he and I talked about at Media Day. And I'm really curious just to see how a big athletic body like that could potentially impact this game with everything on the line. So, we're going to see the most that you can possibly get out of all of these guys.
Right. And I mean, Javon Parker gets a chance to play his, a school for his former state. So there's plenty of motivating guys that are able to do it. I don't know. The interesting thing about this game is every single game this season, Washington's had the better coaching staff.
Right.
I'm not saying Michigan's better than Washington. But again, of anybody, Jim Harbaugh is a pretty dang good coach. Like
he's a fantastic coach. And so I think that this might be the matchup of the two best coaching staffs in the country. I'm sorry, I just want to throw that in there.
No, it is, and that's the thing is and the more, I don't know if you've heard this, but how Jim Harbaugh fixed the defense was using his brother.
Yes, I listened to that Joel Klatt piece this morning. Yeah, I got to give a shout out to the awesome everydayer Josh Chin who sent me that. It was like, hey, make sure you listen to this. This is fantastic. So that was a really incredible piece. Yeah.
So when I heard that, I'm thinking, okay, so now Harbaugh knew the problem, fixed it. Sherrod Moore is not the problem on offense. The offense is fine.
Right.
They fixed the defense. Who do you take, Jesse Minter or Chuck Morrell?
I love Chuck, but I got to take Jesse Minter.
And I think that's why Washington is an underdog in this game. That's why. But sure. At the same point, why Washington could still win the game is Chuck knows how to do it. But I just don't know. And especially, I mean, man, they really got to load the box up, because seeing those wide defensive line sets, to me, Blake Corum is going to run through those all day long. And especially when you're double teaming 5-on-4, it's just an absolute disaster waiting to happen.
You're absolutely right. And we've had some people in the comments that have just tried to run down Chuck Morrell this season, and his defense has struggled a lot at points this year. We're not denying that. We've never denied that. We've just said this defense is better than some people give it credit for, which is also true.
Yeah.
But this is another place where we have to give Chuck Morrell a lot of credit. And I'm not going to talk about the Oregon game where he made fantastic adjustments from the first game to the second game, but I want to talk about the Utah game. While that offense is not what Oregon's is, it's not what Texas's is, it's not what Michigan's is, because it's just flat out not nearly as talented. But when we look at what happened in the Utah game, that team was able to gash Washington's defense over and over and over and over again in the first half. They go into the locker room, they make some adjustments. Washington comes out and allows 75 total yards of offense in the second half. And that just speaks to how good this coaching staff is, that they're able to make adjustments. I know everybody does that, but just the complexity and just the success of the adjustments that they've made and how often that's worked for this team. And that's something that I don't think can be understated.
No, it can't. I think that's the thing, is we're not dragging Morrell. We're more or less just saying it's a 1A, 1B situation, or maybe a 1-2 situation, but there's plenty of evidence that the staff knows what they're doing. And you mentioned a few of them, but then you also have Cam Fab and Asa Turner and all those other guys, Mish Powell. How that Mish Powell blitz does not get, and I think that'll be, but that will also be a key for how do you stop Blake Corum if you're in a 3rd and long, right? If Blake Corum sprints outside and Mish is right there to tackle him, that's big. If he's not, or if somebody misses a tackle. And because if you remember the 21 game, which again, 2 different teams, but Washington actually was relatively in that game, all things considered, until Blake Corum torched him for a 67-yard touchdown run in the 3rd quarter, and that was all she wrote. Because at that point, then you just ground and pound the game away. So this is a certainly better offensive team. I just don't. I mean, well, we've also seen this team win shootouts. We've seen them trade blow for blow with USC. So. They've won all types of games. The thing is, Michigan hasn't won that many close games. So
No, Michigan's been able to put their opponents away and just not ever let them back into the game. But so there's one other thing I want to bring up just when it comes to in terms of adjustments and timely play calling. You talk about that Mies Powell play. There's one other play that I want to mention from the Sugar Bowl that I noticed. So Washington brought a blitz from Edifon Ulofoshio, came up the middle, and they were playing zone behind it. And Xavier Worthy was just running free over the middle. And he had like 20 yards of open field behind him if he was able to catch the ball. But the blitz was so well timed. It was well disguised. And everything that went into that play call was so perfect that Quinn Ewers had to get rid of the ball and couldn't, set his feet and get it to Worthy in time. And we've seen that happen on multiple occasions this season. So while this Washington defense has definitely been suspect at many points this season, they continue to step up when it matters. And that's the thing, because you and I have said it all season. We look at the USC game. We look at the Washington State game. We look at both games against Oregon. When they have needed to make a play, they have done that. All right, Lars, we are going to move on because in 4 of the last 5 games, Washington has been the underdog. And it's a role they seem to enjoy, but we're going to get into it a little bit more. And that's right after we give a message to our good friends over at Game Time, because if you are going to be in Houston and you don't have tickets to the game yet, you shouldn't be stressed when you're trying to do that. And Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. It's so easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area, and Game Time offers the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, all kinds of protections to make sure that you're saving money. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It is the place to find last-minute seats with zone deals. You pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for big time savings. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So this all started against Oregon State. Washington goes down on the road to play a top 10 team in Oregon State at the time. They were 1-point underdogs. That was an interesting game, but they come out ahead. Favorite against Washington State. It's a battle. Then they're 9.5-point dogs to Oregon. Then they end up being 3.5 by the time the game started. I know the line moved. Then they're 3.5. So it's 3 of the last 4. And I know that, and then we get to Michigan. Michigan's a great team. We're not saying that Washington should be favored, but 4.5 just kind of feels like a little much. But this Washington team, I feel like we're still at the point where they're not getting the respect that they deserve from some.
I would agree. The only thing, if this was against Alabama, just work with me here. If this was against Alabama, sure. Washington has such an inferior offense to Jalen Milroe and all of the Tommy Rees in Alabama. The Michigan's kind of the worst matchup for Washington, where they can certainly win, but I don't know in any conceivable world that Washington should be favored in this game. Because if you put the line at 1.5, it's a pick 'em. Okay, fair. 2.5, respectable. You're saying it's a possession or less. 3.5, field goal, wins the game or not. 4.5, okay. But it's not. I think to your point, it's almost like it's a prove it opportunity for Washington. But sure. I don't think it's a disrespect thing, because if Washington, let's say Washington's favored by 1.5. How many people are betting on Michigan to? Oh,
they're slamming the Michigan line for sure, and
that's the other side of the coin. That's the other side.
No, you're right, because that feels like where we are, where it's we want you to bet on Washington. We want you to do this. So I don't disagree. I'm not saying okay, no, the line is disrespectful. The line is this. The line is that. But it's just something we've heard so much at this point. Like I know I put the video out there on Twitter where I was standing next to Troy Fautanu during the presentation of the Sugar Bowl trophy, and he's standing there yelling, ESPN doesn't watch football, basketball on grass, all these things. We still haven't, as you pointed out to me the other night, we still haven't heard from Booger McFarland after tweeting Sweat and Murphy a couple times. Still, the guy's a ghost. Just won't bring that up.
Did he go on McElroy's podcast? I thought I saw a video of him going.
So he went on McElroy's podcast, but we still haven't seen like anything else about that game.
You never will.
Just no, but that's more the point, right? Where this team has faced adversity so many times this season, because this is more the point I wanted to discuss. But this is the role they played for so long now that they're used to it and they seem to enjoy it. And I think that that's something that just can't be overlooked in this game, because this gives them a little bit of an edge. I'm not saying like, oh yeah, this is what's going to put them over the top. The fact that they're underdogs is going to win them the game, but it's something that they definitely take note of.
I mean, they're a natural fit for it. I mean, if you look at the team, Penix, naysayer. How many naysayers does he have? You know, I mean, like, right. Oh, so did you see that clip?
Hey, he won himself a lot of fans. Shout out to Metro Boomin. He won himself a lot of fans on Monday night.
Oh, with his post game?
Yeah.
With the
not just the post game, but with everything. Just everything that he did on Monday, which is ridiculous. That's a whole other Heisman conversation. But right. Michael Penix won himself a lot of fans on Monday night. But you know, your point is very valid. Your point stands.
And you know, I was talking with Jalen Polk on Thursday about this, where you know it's hey, you know, you've worked through so much in your career. You know, you had the collarbone freak thing that happened at the first play of the game, almost, I believe, against
Montana.
Montana, yeah. And so not to be in a position to play for a national championship and near your, you know, in your home state, not near Lufkin, but because I think Lufkin's about an hour and a half away, I think is what he said, in that ballpark.
Couldn't tell.
I was going to, it's in the state of Texas. It's all that matters. But the state of Texas is very large, so that's not saying a ton. But to get back on track here, the point is there's so many teams. There's so many players on this team. I mean, Troy Fatano is what, a 3 or 4 star. Roger was a 4 star, but a lot of these guys were kind of,
Troy was a 4, yeah.
But eventually a 4. But I think a lot of these guys were kind of like, hey, you know, we'll go to Washington to get that opportunity, but a lot of people passed us over. You know, Penix, injury history, all that. And it's kind of funny to see people like, wait, are they really actually believe? We've been saying that for months, where it's like, how can you blame the injury? Again, I understand the NFL will question it, right? Because once you get that medical history and you see that, okay, you just want to make sure everything's good to go. But he's proven this season he can take a hit, can make a throw, can run. Again, he's not Jaden Daniels, but he can run and can throw it better than any quarterback in the country. So to me, it's they're all legs. You know, to coin Jalen Milroe's phrase, right? Yeah, let a naysayer throw. Yeah. Let a naysayer know. You know, it's like that. That's Washington should probably borrow that for this game, because they've been doing that all season.
Right. No, so you're right, and I agree with all your point, because I just feel that it's become such a commonality with this team over the last month of, all right, well, they beat Oregon. Oh, we're still gonna, you know, they're still gonna be 10-point dogs. And I like, again, the reasoning behind it, sure, you hear it. Does it always make sense? No. But there have just been so many doubters around this team this season. Coming into the season, there were a lot of people, oh, I don't know if Washington's really going to be all that good. And they found ways to win games. Having 10 straight games be decided by 7 points or less is absolutely wild. And it's just, it all comes back to the same thing of, they're happy in this role. They don't seem to mind playing close games. And I feel like at the end of the day, it all comes down to it comes back to Kalen DeBoer's culture. And Lars, we've said it for a while now. He keeps telling his team, you're built for this. Whatever it is, through all these obstacles, through everything, that his guys are built for this moment.
And it's because Kalen's built for it. I mean, I don't know how much I can say, but I ran into the guy about 25, 30 minutes ago, because actually he ran into us. And you can just tell he's built for just kind of everything. He knows how to run things. He knows, even if he's got to figure something out, what to do. He knows how to handle it. He's strategic. He's smart. He's also willing to take risks. And I think he knows what he's doing. That's the whole point here. He's been in the playoff multiple times. He's won national championships multiple times. This is a bigger stage without question, but it's not new. And so I think for Harbaugh, he's trying to get over the hump. These are two coaches cut from the same cloth and absolutely different material, right? Or the same material but different cloth, or however you want to phrase that, because they are very smart, very brilliant coaches who put smart people around them and know how to acquire talent. I mean, they both hired Courtney Morgan. Hello. So like there's a little bit of difference there. And I think that difference in DeBoer is honestly might what put him over the top.
So I see where you come from there. I agree. And that's something I know we're going to get into a lot more on Monday, which is because like we talked about. And of course, like when we talked about earlier, like this being the two best coaching staffs in the country, we're not shading, the Georgias and the Alabamas of the world, because of course they put together fantastic staffs as well. But these two coaching staffs are up there. And that in itself is going to be its own battle. And to your point, they've just come about this in very different ways. And it's just really interesting to see the two different paths that they've taken to get here, but nonetheless, they're here. And I feel like that's the right way to put a bow on this, is because it doesn't matter that Washington was underdogs in 3 of the last 4, now 4 of the last 5, but they got here. And that was shout out to our buddy Mike Farrell. You and I talked about his piece after the Arizona State game. Washington did this. Washington did that. And it sounds, all these things make it sound like they lost, but Washington won the football game. And another shout out to Christian Capel, who talked about it after, I believe it was the USC game. Had this great piece about why Washington is built to overcome these things, why they've gotten to where they have. And then at the very end, he said, and the committee is going to meet tomorrow to figure out why Washington still sucks. And all of those things have just helped get them to this moment. They've been able to use those things as fuel. DeMarcus Shepard is one of the best motivators when it comes to using those things as fuel. But I think it's a really interesting conversation to have. I feel like that's a good place to put that.
No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, I think it's kind of, we saw that emotion on the field after the game. It's like, it's authentically built, authentically constructed. There's nothing better than college football for this program, or not for this program, but for these two meetings of minds I meant.
Right. No, that's a really good point. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We might have a weekend episode for you. It depends on, some of the logistics down in Houston, but we're going to try to bring you as much content as we possibly can from the national championship game. And if you're new to the channel, you enjoy the content, please make sure you hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We are there. We are everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. We try to do our very best to make sure you're up to date on everything around the Husky program. So make sure you like the video, leave a 5-star review if you're audio only, leave a comment down below. All these things really help out the channel a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Monday.